Greetings, fellow thinkers and drinkers. And here we have our second look at the recorded works of UFO. Last time we left the band after their first two albums and live album with the departure of Mick Bolton. After a couple of false starts, Bernie Marsden, I think even Paul Chapman was involved briefly at this point, they recruited, or let's say they liberated the 18-year-old wunderkind Michael Schenker from the Scorpions. Well, what can I say? If you cannot steal from your friends, then what is the point of having friends? At 18, a precocious talent. But obviously he had to deliver more than just his fretboard wizardry. He was going to have to prove himself on the songwriting front as well. Now, by common consent, Schenker's arrival in 1973 transformed UFO from a wandering space rock jam band into one of the great melodic hard rock outfits of the decade. Across 5 studio albums and a perhaps career-defining live release, the band evolved quite rapidly, I think, sharpening their songwriting skills, improving their production values, and developing into a powerful, disciplined band and sound that would influence generations of rock and metal musicians. Too many. This is a classic era of the band, which produced, shall we say, their best and most vital music. Well, let us see, shall we? Their first recorded effort, with the band still very much the same, was just the Schenker-Bolton swap. So it was still Phil Mogg, Andy Parker, and Pete Way. They recorded and released Phenomenal in 1974, which proved to be a turning point. They shed nearly all of their cosmic jam-heavy beginnings and started to embrace more concise hard rock songs but with a very definite melodic edge. What can I say about this album? I'm sure you're all familiar with it. Doctor Doctor, career-defining anthem. And here, Schenker's lead work is exceptional, and this is iconic. You can say the same for Rock Bottom, another career-defining song. Expensive, dramatic, perhaps the first real showcase of his guitar virtuosity. We also got, what else is on here? Space Child, which I have to say does hark back a little bit to the previous two albums. So sort of a lingering farewell, if you like. But in this case, this song, despite the title and lyrics, etc., is a much more concise and focused effort than anything just about you'd have found earlier on. Some other good stuff on here. Oh My is a decent opener. Rocks, but has a strong melody. Perhaps more portentous of what was to come. Crystal Light, on the other hand, something of a ballad. And for my money, not their strongest effort. Again, slightly reflective of what had gone in the past. But it's by no means a bad effort or a weak song or anything. A couple of other things. Too Young to Know and Time on My Hands, both are serviceable melodic rock songs, but perhaps lack the spark of the stronger material found on this album. Quite commercial, very listenable, very catchy. Built for Comfort, on the other hand, I also thought was a bit plodding. So it never really caught my imagination. Lipstick Traces, it's a nice evocative instrumental, and I have to say I really like it. The album finishes with a song called Queen of the Deep, which does, in spirit at least, hark back to the first two albums. But again, I have to say it's a much tighter construction. There's nothing, I think approximately 6 minutes. There's none of the excesses we've found before, and it's still a very impressive contribution. It's an attempt to have an epic album closer, which almost succeeds. Song's pretty good, but again, you cannot argue with Schenker's guitar work. Now, the production on the first two albums were, just simply not great, was it? It was flat, it was dull, it was muddy. On this occasion, they roped in Leo Lyons, who was perhaps best known as being the bassist for 10 years after, although he did have quite a lot of production credits to his credit. And there's a noticeable change, stroke improvement. This is raw, but it's purposeful. Much clearer emphasis on the guitar. Production, for my taste, is a little thin still. Doesn't quite have that oomph, that power you're looking for in some of the, the better productions. But, well, it's okay. More disciplined, cleaner, clearer, better balanced. Certainly than anything on the first two efforts. Is this the moment UFO became UFO? Well, I suppose it is. Again, as I've said, the songs are much more structured. The arrangements are much tighter. And, with Schenker as perhaps now the creative centerpiece, gone are the sprawling space rock improvisations. They're replaced by sharp, riff-driven songwriting. Well, I have to say, despite its reputation, this is perhaps, when you listen to it with the benefit of hindsight, this is a more transitional record from the first two than perhaps many people give it credit for. And there are, as I mentioned, a couple of things on it that would not have been out of place on either of the first two records. But Schenker's playing is outstanding. I don't know how can you say, he can say more in 30 seconds than sometimes Mick Bolton did in 26 minutes. And that's not a dig at Mick Bolton. It's just that Schenker is an extremely talented musician. And the other thing that stands out here is Phil Mogg. We're really starting to hear his vocals develop into that style, that presence that would be a hallmark of the band's career going forward. He was, and a very definite sense of melody in this, in his contribution to the songwriting. It was not that apparent, certainly on the first two. Initially, it was not a huge success, but it did sell better than the debut and Flying, and it did garner more critical acclaim. They were on their way. They followed it up in 1975 with Fawcett, play on words. In this case, on this album, I suppose you say they've taken what they had on Phenomenon and they've sharpened it. It's tighter playing, tighter songwriting. It's a bit heavier, I say it's punchier, and it's a more confident sounding record. Highlights, well, my God, it's just full of them. I mean, look, Let It Roll and Shoot Shoot, what a great opening burst. Two of the finest ever songs, and two songs that almost had permanent fixture in the live set until the end of their career. Mother Mary, another one, so a real hard rock perfection, this huge song, driving energy. Love Lost Love is much more melodic, but it's still a great song, and it's a very powerful song. Out on the Streets, one of my all-time favorite UFO songs. I suppose I got so used to hearing it on the live album, it does sound a bit tamer, shall we say, on the studio, but it is inherently just such a damn fine effort. You can't overlook it. Too Much of Nothing, another strong rocker, very infectious chorus. The Kids, as I say, another band classic. There are a couple of things here that for me don't really cut it. High Flyer, slow, pleasant, whimsical even, but not that impactful. Dance Your Life Away also. It's despite a quirky riff that promises much, doesn't quite deliver. So there's a couple of things that are not quite that strong. So again, Leo Lyons produced this, and it's in terms of sonics, to me it's an improvement. It's warmer, it's heavier, it's got slightly more polish to it. It's a fuller sound. The guitar and the bass sits tighter in the mix, more complementary of each other. It gives the album more punch, I would say. Now, I say Fawcett, controversial title. Here, two words, but obviously a play on the American word faucet, which the rest of the English-speaking world refer to as a tap. a very controversial cover. I won't go into detail, but let's just say they wouldn't get away with it today, I don't think. Compared to their last effort, it's a step up in consistency. Say they're refining. Let's say they're refining the blueprint they started on Phenomenon, and they're moving toward that, distinctly British hard rock sound that would be associated with them. It's less quirky, more forceful. I have to say, in places, it's increasingly radio friendly, but it does not lose its edge. Again, this met with critical acclaim, and it did start to chart in the UK, Germany, and perhaps surprisingly, in the US. They followed it up the next year, and those were the days, the bands were putting out at least one album a year at the beginning of their career, while touring relentlessly. And this brings us to No Heavy Petting in 1976, I believe. In this case, they've augmented the lineup with Danny Peronel, who was brought in to play keyboards. I think also did some writing, if I recall correctly. Perhaps something of a transitional record in hindsight. They start experimenting, especially now with the keyboards and that, and this gives them a slightly sleeker sound. Having said that, this is another one that's chock full of great songs. Natural Thing. Oh, how can you go wrong? It's driving, melodic, but heavy. It's instantly memorable. I'm a Loser. Surprisingly emotional. Schenker's playing at his most lyrical. Shows Mogg at his best, both vocally and in terms of lyrics. He was getting poetic, and he could write some really good lyrics, as well as perhaps some more stereotypical hard rock fare. It's always been one of my very favorite UFO songs. Can You Roll Her? It's heavy, energetic, catchy. Again, can't go wrong with this. Belladonna. Okay, talk about what would become known as the god-awful power ballad in a decade or two's time. Now, if you're going to do that type of song, this is how you do it without resorting to tropes and to cliche and, nauseating pop. If you're going to do that sort of melodic ballad song with power to it, this is how you do it. And so the power comes from the construction, not just when the engineer or the mixer ups the keyboards at the chorus. This is how you write that type of song. Highway Lady, well, it's a bit more commercial, but it's undeniably effective, and it's undeniably great fun to listen to. And they close it with a Martian landscape. I just cannot forget their roots, can they? It's another attempt for a bit of an epic, and again, fantastic playing by all concerned. And on this one, Phil Mogg is absolutely outstanding. This is really strong stuff. Untypical of the rest of the album, perhaps, but it is showing that it could compose more complex, thoughtful, dare one say, serious pieces. I really like this. I really do. Again, though, I have to say there's a couple of moments that don't quite cut it. Reasons Love, which is fine, but it's kind of middle of the road. I'm not going to say filler. On with the action. It's another one attempt to be a little bit heavier. And it is heavier. It's perhaps one of the more metal-sounding songs on the album. Much more darker in tone, and perhaps, again, trying to be more serious. But again, despite some great playing on it, it just falls a bit flat somehow. I never really clicked with that one. And then there's A Fool in Love, which is far too honky-tonk for my tastes. Not their strongest effort by any means. But again, it'd be hard-pushed to say it was bad, per se. This turns out to be Lion's last effort with a band, the producer. And he's gone for a warmer, rounder, more polished sound. Again, the keyboards are more prominent in the mix and the constructions. They're adding color, certainly, expanding the sonic scope, expanding the range. Do they sometimes dilute the attack a little bit? Well, possibly. I don't know. Again, I said this may be seen in hindsight as a, even within this era of the band, as something of a transitional album. Um, they're being more experimental with various textures here than they had on the other two. Perhaps not as cohesive, as some of the others of this era, but it's it's a good rock. It really is, and in some ways, it really does. I think it takes them from the first two, from Phenomenon and the other one I've forgotten. God, how can I forget this? Fawcett, my God. Um, and it lays the groundwork, I think, for the two that were to follow, which are commonly seen by many as the major successes of this lineup. Again, critical acclaim, and again, modest chart success. Okay, Lights Out in 1977, seen by many as their creative peak. It's tight, heavy, dynamic, wonderfully produced. Is this UFO at their best, their most confident? Well, we'll see. They've augmented the lineup this time again, but with Paul Raymond, who joined not only on keyboards but on rhythm guitar, and he has much more impact, I think, than did Danny Peronell. Highlights, well, most of it really isn't. I mean, Too Hot to Handle. What can you say? Infectious, hard rock swagger. Don't we just love it? Just Another Suicide, slightly poppier, I have to say, but it's highly catchy and it's highly effective, and song I really like. Got the title track, Lights Out, thunderous, aggressive, expertly crafted. Again, what I say, these are live favorites, and for good reason. Getting Ready, yeah, okay, it's got a classic UFO groove to it, instantly recognizable. And I have to say that it's the groove that saves it on this occasion. Otherwise, it could be a little bit ordinary. And obviously, how can one forget Love to Love? A masterpiece. It's atmospheric, it's symphonic, it's emotionally rich. I tell you, if you play this one to your wife, your girlfriend, and this does not have her cooking your favorite meal, dressed in nothing but her most provocative lingerie, then nothing will. Though again, there are a couple of less than stellar moments on this. Alone Again, or as a cover, I forget who wrote it originally. And I can best describe this as pleasant but unnecessary. Try Me, soft, dynamic, yet somehow. This is one where the production values come more into the play. Most synths and strings and stuff on it. Gone for a much bigger production, much bigger sound. And for some reason, I've never quite liked it. It's never quite connected with me. And I don't quite know why, because it's got all the ingredients of being a great UFO song, but for some reason, never quite did it for me. Well, there you go. Clean up with Electric Phase, which is another strong rocker. It's heavy, but I have to say it's good rather than great. Now, on this occasion, Ron Nevison stepped in to the producer's chair. And what a difference, I have to say. He gives Schenker's guitar a glossy sharpness to it, which is really memorable. And I don't know how far he was involved in this and, getting the orchestrations and stuff and like that, but it's certainly, his work on this album is really, really good. Sonically, it is easily the best thing that they've released. It's immense. It really is an immense sound, but there's nothing bloated about it. It really isn't. It hits the sweet spot. I suppose one could say in hindsight, this is, the moment everything clicks. Songwriting, production, performance. UFO sound fully realized, do they? Ready for the big league? Are they? Yeah. Well, that's what conventional wisdom would have you say, but I have to say, again, there's still a couple of things on here that don't quite cut it. And we're still missing that perfect album. We're still missing that 10 out of 10 album. The weaker songs are getting less in number, but they're still in evidence. And again, all the positive things I said about it, and of course we all know and love this album, they were reflected in sales, which were now really starting to take off in They're charting a lot higher. And, the critical acclaim was growing. Obsession came out in 1978, same lineup as the previous album. And this takes over from where Lights Out left off. It's more refined, it's more mature, and in some ways perhaps even more musically ambitious. Nuanced record, I think, rewards repeated listening. I think maybe not as so many instant classics as on Lights Out. But the highlights, again, are just exceptional. Only You Can Rock Me. Need I say any more? One of their finest, immaculate hooks and precision. It's just a classic song. Looking Out for Number One, another real favorite. Atmospheric, beautifully played, surprisingly sophisticated. Again, that's happened before when they've tried stuff with Martian Landscape, I mentioned earlier. They've occasionally they're moved away from the classic, melodic hard rock without going back to the excesses of their beginnings, and they've some really mature, sophisticated compositions. This is one of them. Pack It Up and Go is another high-energy rock song, a lot of bite to it. Aubrey Hill is a short, sweet instrumental. It's a bit medieval sounding, actually. Think Blackmore's Night. You won't be too far away. But it's nice. I like it. Hot and Ready, yes. Okay, it's another one of those typical UFO rockers. And Cherry. One of their finest ever songs. Utterly infectious. How can you not like Cherry? But again, so there's a couple of weaker tracks on offer here. Ain't No Baby was a slower effort, but with a definite hint of menace to it. Heavier, more metal in direction, and in feel, in spirit, I suppose. But somehow for me, it just never quite hit the spot. But again, I can't say it's a bad song. You Don't Fool Me, again, it's not a bad track. But it just lacks the immediacy of the better material. Not just the immediacy, it doesn't stay in the mind over the years, as did the stronger stuff here. They do a reprise of Looking Out for Number One, which is a minute or so instrumental, which is very nice. It's expertly played, it's beautifully played, it's wonderful to listen to, and it's completely unnecessary. And again, One More for the Rodeo and Born to Lose are a couple of songs I say they're decent. But again, I have to say they don't really have the impact of the stronger material on this record. But they're not filler. They're maybe not band classics, but they're very good album tracks. I have to say that. And again, there's a couple of these things that never really grabbed me upon initial listenings, but over the years I have developed a fondness for. Again, Neverson delivers clean, modern sounding production, richly balanced, gives every instrument is given space. The guitar tone is a little smoother. It's not quite as aggressive, perhaps. The arrangements, let's say, are tighter. They're more controlled. And there's been an obvious progression here not just from the first two albums, but over this period with Schenker in the band. And I think, Obsession is probably the best reflection of that. Not only is it the last album he was going to record with him for a while, but I think in some ways it is, start to finish, the strongest effort. And justification would be that I think the weaker moments on here are stronger than the weaker moments on the previous efforts. And it's been obvious. I mean, if we're taking this journey from the first stages right through to the end, there's been a huge shift from the improvisational even drift of the first two albums to precision songwriting. From the cosmic jams to sleek melodic hard rock, from raw, thin, muddy productions through to really top sounding, professionally sounding rock records. The first two had been exploratory. The first couple with Schenker had been, a band, forging a new direction, trying to find a new voice. if we bring this particular chapter to a close with Obsession, then I think this in some ways is the pinnacle of where this era of the band were going, or what they achieved, perhaps better said. But again, I said, there's still those couple of weaker songs, and I'm still waiting for the perfect album. Unfortunately, there were tensions in the group, this time, which would soon lead to Schenker's departure. But this era of the bands, we cannot discuss it without mentioning the live album, which was recorded on the Obsession tour, Strangers in the Night. And this is the culmination of the Schenker era of the band on one double album. And it is quite rightly regarded as one of the greatest live rock albums ever recorded. Highlights, everything. Weaker moments, none. Even some of the weaker studio songs really come to life on this. It's absolute perfection. Great sound, huge, clear, impeccably balanced, captures Schenker at his peak, the band at their peak. Really is. Just listen to it. And in some ways, it summarizes what they'd achieved, I think, what they'd perhaps been building up to. It's, power without excess, it's melody without softness, it's precision without sterility. It turned out, at least for a while, to be the final but utterly triumphant statement of this lineup of the band. So they traveled a long way in a relatively short period. 10 years almost, I suppose. Looking back, it's a relatively short period of time. No longer that unfocused, jam-based outfit they were on their first two albums. And you have to say a lot of that must have been down to Michael Schenker, putting, not just his playing on that, but also his songwriting sensibilities. And he seems to have brought out the best in Mogg and Way, Andy Parker, and latterly Paul Raymond. However, Schenker did have mercurial abilities with the guitar, but he also had a couple of personal or personality issues. Not going to go into that. But effectively, the band fell out. And Schenker would go. And that brought this, what many regard as the classic incarnation of UFO to its end. And as great as these albums are, and they are, it would be previous, I think, to say that this represented the band's artistic and creative peak. And it is far too early to close the book on this particular story. There is much more to come, which we shall pick up next time. So, okay. Anyway, what do you think? Are we in agreement? Are we not in agreement? Please feel free to like, to subscribe, to share, obviously to comment. Let me know your thoughts. And until next time, I thank you for your indulgence. I wish you well, and Maçhonquèrre.